This afternoon around 3 o'clock, the TNPF had a meeting with sports club members of Vadamarachchi East, Maruthankerny. The meeting took place in a public playground and it was outdoors under a tree. We met about 20 members of the sports club, and whilst we were having the meeting, two individuals came in on a motorbike and parked their motorbike rather close to us, maybe about 10 or 15 feet away. At which point I was in the middle of the meeting. I was in fact talking, and when these two individuals got off the motorbike, my research officer, who was seated with me, noticed that one of them had a weapon, or suspected that a person had a weapon. So he approached the two individuals and asked them as to what the purpose of them coming to that area. They did not give any reasonable reason, at which point he had proceeded to ask for their identity. When one of them had informed him that they were CID intelligence officers. When I heard this being said, I approached those two officers, or those two individuals rather, and asked them to produce their official identification, for which they refused to. They also insisted that that there is no reason for them to show it, and that the meeting that we were carrying out was illegal. At which point I insisted that I needed to know their identity, and in the course of that conversation, one officer attempted to leave the area. I pursued him and continued to ask him for the identity. When he was trying to move away, I tried to apprehend him, at which point he assaulted me and he began to run. The other individual was surrounded, and whilst we were trying to get his identity, or get him to show his identity, another two individuals from across the fence, which was a school building, school premises, came out. One was in police uniform, the other was in a police sports attire. They shouted across the fence saying that those individuals were police officers and to let them go. When I said that I need to see their identities to ensure who they are, because they acted in a suspicious way, the officer in sports uniform across the fence began to abuse me in foul language, at which point I stopped engaging with them and continued to try and get the identity of the officer that we had managed to apprehend. The officer concerned resisted in identifying himself, at which point the sports club members began to shout, saying that the officer across the fence, wearing sports uniform, had taken out his pistol and had loaded it and was pointing it at me. And whilst this was being said, and I was trying to try and verify what was being said, a police four-wheeler entered the grounds and a senior officer called SI, I forget his name, SI Jayatissa, came up to me and said in a loud voice that these are all police officers, and that there is no business in us trying to hold them, and that he asked that officer who we had apprehended to leave. Then I identified myself as a member of parliament, and I said that they behaved in a very suspicious way. One person, they both refused to identify themselves. One person assaulted me and ran away. The officers in uniform, one of them across the fence, had abused me in foul language and had proceeded to load his firearm, his pistol, and had pointed it at me. And that the individual that we had in fact apprehended continues to refuse to identify himself. So I said that these are all breaches of my rights and in fact offences that have been committed against me, and that I want action to be taken, and therefore I asked the SI to kindly ask the officer across the fence who had taken aim at me to produce his identity card. The SI refused to do so. He kept saying that that there is no need for him to identify himself, and that he is not involved in this matter, and the individual concerned also need not be apprehended anymore, and that he was going to ask them to leave. Then at which point I again insisted that him being a senior officer in charge of all these officers, knowing their identities, and me having told him very clearly that my rights have been violated and offences have been committed by all three of them, and that he is at the site and has in his presence all the witnesses of over 20 individuals being there, not being willing to pursue a full investigation means that he himself is in breach of duty, and that I will in fact take action, and I wanted him to take note of that. At which point he asked me to come to the police station to make a statement. I said the Maruthankerny police officers who he himself has identified as being such are the ones who have in fact behaved in a very threatening manner. I said that I don't feel safe to come to the police station, but I am prepared to give whatever statement that he wants at the spot, and at the same time all witnesses of over 20 individuals were present, and that these investigations can be done in the spot itself. The officer refused to proceed and instead asked the other officer who we had apprehended to leave. He, even after several requests, refused to get the officer who took aim at me to identify himself, nor was he willing to reveal the identity of the individual who assaulted me and took off. Although he says that all three of them, or all four of them, because there was a uniformed police officer across the fence as well, he refused to accept or investigate into this matter any further. I have already informed the Human Rights Commission, Jaffna branch of the incident. The Human Rights Commission officer has informed me that he will meet me tomorrow and get a fuller version so that he can make a note of it. As far as I am concerned, if a member of parliament who, after identifying myself, after showing my identity card to these officers, asking them for their identity, not only them refusing, but a senior officer, despite me telling him that an officer belonging to his police station not only has abused me in foul language, but also has loaded his weapon and taken aim, simply because of me asking for the identity of plainclothes officers who claim to be intelligence officers but refuse to verify their identity. If this is how a member of parliament can be treated, then I think everyone can imagine how the general Tamil population in the northeast are treated. The police, as we have repeatedly maintained, are in the northeast not for the protection of the people of the northeast. They continue to act as an occupational hostile force to anyone who has an alternate point of view with regards to the way in which the state behaves towards the Tamil people, or for that matter with regards to the way in which the state behaves with anybody who does not belong to the majority community.